Hello, BookTube. I am going to do a tag for you this evening. Steve Donoghue tagged me originally in the character adaptation tag. Now he's created another one, the character adaptation tag 2, The Wrath of the Tag. And I saw that this morning, and I thought, ooh, very interesting. He didn't tag really anybody, or just anybody who would be interested in doing it. And I thought of it today at work, and it made work a little more pleasurable. That I was thinking, what could I do for this? And I'm going to do a twist on it, Steve. It's going to be a silent film, for the most part. There's a couple things I will diverge a little bit occasionally, and one question will not be silent, but let's get to it. The first question he has: give your top runner-up movies, series, adaptations of books. Now, for me, this would be The Phantom Carriage, 1921, by Victor Seastrom. It's based on a novel by Salma Legrov. Probably not going to pronounce this correctly, but it's Corcarton, translated Thy Shalt Bear Witness, from 1921 as well. And it was like... I like the adaptation even better than the book, I think, because the book, she was sort of commissioned to write it to do with tuberculosis. It's basically about a woman, social worker, who's dying, and she wants to see someone she's helped through her life. David Holm, played also by Victor Seastrom. But Victor Seastrom is not a very nice character. And he hasn't treated his wife and family well. It's set sort of New Year's Eve over Christmas, New Year's Eve especially, and there is a character death basically that goes around collecting the dead, and every New Year's Eve he passes the mantle on to someone else. And as Victor Seastrom's character David Holm is drunk and dies, he gets passed on, and he gets to see another side of things, and how what his treatment of people have what they're like. So it's a fascinating film, and the in-camera special effects are just marvelous. The triple, quadruple, 5, 6 exposures that they did to achieve this was just amazing. I could go on and on with this, but I better stop with The Phantom Carriage. It's definitely worth watching. It's Swedish as well. It's a Swedish film. Next one would be Napoleon, 1927, Abel Gance. Albert Dayton played Napoleon. It's almost 6 hours long. It's been restored as much as possible. Kevin Braunlau, who I've mentioned in several occasions in his books, he spent a lifetime getting this restored as much as possible, and got to know Abel Gance in his last years as well. It is now out on a DVD and Blu-ray through BFI, British Film Institute. For a long time, they had trouble with this because Francis Ford Coppola and is it his father, who did a score to it, said that he owned the rights to everything here. He destroyed the film, or he butchered it. He mixed up scenes, he cut stuff out. Meanwhile, Kevin Braunlau is spending 50 years of his life getting this back to the original film that Abel Gance had made, and here comes along Francis Ford Coppola just chopping it to bits, and horrible score. I don't know. Anyway, it's just bad. Got a bad taste with Francis Ford Coppola for most of his stuff. Anyway, I know he's popular, but anyhow, Carl Davis has created a score, and I saw this at the Royal Albert Hall I've seen it twice there. And it's just amazing with a live orchestra. And the last scenes, the triptych, it's sort of a wide screen, but it's three full screens side by side, doing sometimes the same, so it's split in three, or sometimes there's different scenes in each, but it all works together. And with a the live orchestra, it's just amazing. It's only one, like I say, it's almost 6 hours long. It's over 5 hours. And it ends with Napoleon entering Italy in 1796. And Abel Gance had planned 6 films in total to chart Napoleon's life right up to his death. But sound came along and sort of destroyed everything. Steve mentioned Ben-Hur. Yeah, the original Ben-Hur is great. The 1925 version, that is. That's bloody amazing. It's with Raymond Navarro and Fred Nebo. Well, there were several directors. Fred Nebo was one of them, the main director. And I saw this again at the Royal Albert Hall with Carl Davis score with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Was it the Royal Symphony Orchestra? The Royal Symphony Orchestra, because the other ones are Royal Philharmonic. And it's just, it's really amazing because I've never been to a cinema anywhere. If everybody's seen the Charlton Heston version, the William Wyler version for the 50s, which is a good film as well, and you know how exciting the horse racing is, the race. It's so much better in the silent film, and especially with a live orchestra. I've never seen an audience that just, the place was packed to the gills, and they just all jumped up and cheered when Ben-Hur won. They also went to Italy to film this, and they used real life-size reconstructions of triremes, and they burnt them. I believe it was a bit of an accident, but it's captured on film. And then we can go on to another one, is Les Miserables. 1925, again, almost 6 hours long. It's a French film, directed by Henri Fescourt. It was a time where people would go and watch a film in 3 or 4 nights in a row. And that's what a lot of this stuff is, that when it was that long. But getting back, is Les Miserables. I think it's the best adaptation that there has ever been of Les Miserables. It's more true to the book, Victor Hugo's 1862 book, than anything that I've seen. There's other ones that I like. I like the Frederick March version with Charles Laughton as Javert, Frederick March as Jean Valjean. But in the 1925 version, it's Gabriel who plays Jean Valjean, and Jean Toulon who played Javert. And in 2017, I got to see this at the Barbican with Neil Brand playing piano. Yeah, playing piano for almost 6 hours. There were breaks, but still, it's quite an amazing feat. Second question. Yeah, we're just on second so far. A very good character adaptation in an otherwise poor movie. Now, my choice of the poor movie is not because of the director, the actors, or anything like that. It was because it was butchered. It is 1924's Erich von Stroheim's Greed, which was based on Frank Norris's 1899 novel, McTeague. It is said that that Stroheim filmed every scene except a scene where dogs are fighting in the street. The producers got this and basically crapped themselves. It's varying of how many hours this thing may have been. It could have been 6, 8, 10, 15 hours long. So they took it away from him. They chopped it up. What's left is good, but you can just see what it would have been if Stroheim would have been able to put it together in the end himself. There is a reconstruction which I haven't seen, but it only came out on VHS, and it's I think 3 or 4 hours long. They use stills and other little titles to try to patch up a few things a lot of things that are missing. But I haven't seen it. Zazu Pitts is on it as well. But yeah, Gibson Gowland plays John McTeague. It's a fabulous film. And this is where I'm going to go a little bit aside because it's about Erich von Stroheim a little bit because there's some really interesting things. Erich von Stroheim was a German. He came over, he played bit parts in films, and then he started directing. And like during the First World War, they had him play, a maniacal German officers because he just had that look to him. And there's a famous scene in, I can't remember the exact film. Should have looked it up. But he's fighting with a woman in a room, and he picks up a baby, and he just throws the baby. Well, not a real baby, but he throws the baby out the window, showing how bad the Hun are and stuff. And it's just way, way, way over the top. So much over the top that I think he just loved. He loved playing those evil parts. And you just if you Google and you see a picture of him, you'll understand what I'm saying. But he went into sound films too, and there's 2 great ones, or at least I think are great films. 1943's Five Graves to Cairo, where he plays Field Marshal Rommel. It's a really good film. And then another one, which is a sort of nod to his past, is 1950's Sunset Boulevard by Billy Wilder directed this. It's a lot of people probably know this. It's Gloria Swanson's in it. William Holden is a down-and-out scriptwriter, and he's hiding, and he finds Gloria Swanson, who's a not washed-up actress, but was a silent film actress and no longer is a silent film actress and is still living in those days. Her butler is Max Merling, played by Stroheim, who was a director, and there's great scenes. He says, well, they took it away from me and so forth, and it just harkens back, and it's just great. And there's another fabulous, fabulous scene in there. There's a bridge game, and it's got Buster Keaton. Everybody knows Buster Keaton. But it's also got H.B. Warner, which is a fabulous, fabulous character actor, silent film, up at the sound. If you've seen It's a Wonderful Life, he was Old Man Gower, the druggist. There's Anna Q. Nilsson that's at the table as well, and she was a Swedish starlet that started, forget about Garbo. Look up Anna Q. Nilsson. She did silent stuff too, but basically mostly bit parts and just very small parts, and a lot of times uncredited. But she did a fabulous film called Regeneration in 1915, and it's about crime, drugs, prostitution, you name it, 1915. Let's go on now to 3. That was my divergence there. 3 will be quick because I'm not going to go into too much detail. Which books are your holy grail for film adaptations? Now, this is where I come out of the silent film aspect of this. I would say it's the Hyperion Cantos, a series of books by Dan Simmons. I would love to see that in a number of films on a grand scale. Steve mentioned the Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Why couldn't I think of that? The structure of the first book, Hyperion, is sort of like that. There's a group of people going on a spaceship, and they're telling their story. But later on, there's other characters that come in. John Keats is there, sort of, in a sense. But it's just, I'd love to see that. Another one is one of my favorite books, is Gargantua and Pantagruel by Rabelais. If anybody could do it, it would be Terry Gilliam, probably. But I can't see that ever being done. But yeah, I'd love to see that. And number 4, what would be your dream casting matchup of actor and literary role? Let's go back to Louise Brooks, and I'd love to see her have done a version, even a sound version. Well, let's pretend Louise Brooks in the 20s, when she's in her mid-20s, early 20s. And I'd love to see her in Enchanted April, which was a 1922 novel by Elizabeth von Arnim. I like the book. It's a fun read. There's been a few good film adaptations, but if she would be perfect for the character of Lady Caroline Dester, sort of described as she just enchants everybody, especially men, when they see her. And that definitely fits Louise Brooks. Number 5, is there a book or series you think is unfilmable? Yeah, City by Clifford D. Simak. It's basically a collection of short stories that are tied together, and a main character in there is a robot called Jenkins. And it starts out as if there's a fictitious narrator that's piecing together these tales from ancient times. But the editor and everybody else are dogs. And it's they're doggish tales. And it's just... I just can't see it be done. I know with CGI they could probably do something, but I think in some ways... it's best left to your imagination, even if you could, make a realistic looking CGI of a dog talking. Sometimes that just may not work actually seeing it. But I'd love to see it if somebody tried it. I would definitely look at it. Number 6, what is the first movie adaptation of a book you remember seeing? Now this is back to silent film. Probably most of the science film I really started watching were things like, Chaplin, definitely, I think was the very first, Buster Keaton, and some Lauren Hardy, Harold Lloyd. But I think the very first one that I saw that I could relate to an actual book was Nosferatu, 1922, F.W. Murnau. Max Schreck is playing Count Orlok. It's loosely based on Dracula by Bram Stoker, and at the time, Florence Stoker, Bram Stoker's widow, tried to. Well, she won the suit for plagiarism and copyright, and wanted all copies destroyed. Never happened. Again, there's been a few restorations and a few other items put into it because they've been found. Like there's a few scenes I think in Whitby that were they're supposed to be sitting in Whitby on a bench that were found by Kevin Bronlau in I think like a Serbian or somewhere like that, a Serbian film archive. And those have been incinerated. And the subtitle of it is, it's Nosferatu, a Symphony in Horror, or Symphony of Horror. In Horror or of Horror, sorry. But I first saw it on late night TV, and don't know what they were thinking. They were putting like bebop jazz to it. That was the music. And again, this is called a Symphony of Horror. So all I did was just turn off the sound, and I think I put on some classical music just to have some music along with it. But I think that was the very first one that I saw. And following on for that, a nice little aside is in 2000, a film was made called The Shadow of the Vampire with John Malkovich playing F.W. Murnau, and it's the filming of Nosferatu. And Daniel Defoe plays Shrek. I think it's his best performance, bar none. You couldn't tell it's him, but it's also, they took a little twist on it. Max Schreck is actually a vampire. So they've used a real vampire, the idea is, in the filming. John Malkovich is not a fan of John Malkovich, but he really fits that role well. Eddie Izzard is in there playing the actor who played the Jonathan Harker character. And yeah, it's just quite. It's funny, and if you know about the film and the history of it, there's a lot of little secrets, not secrets, but little tidbits in it that you would like. Okay, now, all right, that was 6. Yeah, number 7. I'm gonna have to try to go through these as quick as possible. I think I'm about 20 some minutes. Are you a tough sell when it comes to a film adaptation of a book you've read? Put it to the test. What were the last 5 adaptations you saw, and how many of them you liked? Now, again, I'm going to try to keep these to silent films. I'm more forgiving with silent films. In general, I find problems with adaptations of films, but I'm going to stick to silent films for the moment. And one is Die Nebelingen. It's Fritz Lang, 1924. Again, it's almost 5 hours. It's 2 films. And I found it fantastic. There's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is based on Robert Louis Stevens' story, 1920, John Barrymore. John Barrymore's acting is a little OTT, over the top, but it works to a certain extent. And I enjoyed it. The Passion of Joan of Arc, 1929. Carl Theodor Dreyer is the director. Jean Falconetti plays Joan of Arc, and I'm using this one because it's sort of based on her trial record, so there is a book there to a certain extent. And it's fantastic. It's a film of faces, if nothing else. It's just beautiful. And there's a few versions out with different scores on it on Blu-ray, and I think Masters of Cinema Eureka Video has put out a nice set of that. Diary of a Lost Girl. Which that was based on a book as well. It's, again, going back to Louise Brooks, 1929, G.W. Pabst. I actually like that a bit better than the book. If I just flip back to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I think it's a bit poorer than the Stevenson novel. But yeah, so I thought that was actually quite good. And then there's He Who Gets Slapped, 1924. It's back to Victor Seastrom that I mentioned with the Phantom Carriage, but at this point that was done in 1921. By 1924, he was snapped up by Metro Goldwyn MGM, and he was in Hollywood. So he made this He Who Gets Slapped with Lon Chaney and Norma Shearer. It's based on a Russian play. I have to be honest, I have not read it all. I've read snippets of it, and I really like the film. It's basically it's a bit melodramatic. Well, a lot of the material is melodramatic, but it's basically a scientist who has a patron, but then his sort of patron sort of steals all his research. And he's with a board or in front of a whole bunch of academics, and his patron slaps him, and everybody laughs. So as you would, you become a clown. And he calls himself He Who Gets Slapped. But the character that Norma Shearer plays, he falls in love and he wants to rescue her from horrible man she's with. But it's just beautifully done. Again, it's because of Victor Seastrom and Lon Chaney's ability to morph into these characters. And I think that was 4. The 5th one is Beggars of Life. It was based on a book by Jim Tully, but the film, it's 1927, 28, I think it is. Director was William Wellman. Louise Brooks was in it again, and it's a fabulous film. Wallace Beery. It's about Louise Brooks plays an orphan girl that's been taken over by an abusive, sort of adopted by an abusive farmer, and the other character comes in, guy Richard Arlen. At the time, she's just killed him, and she's going to go on the run dressed up as a boy. She joins the Richard Arlen character, and they become hobos. But it's pretty clear that she's not a boy. That wouldn't last very long. And then, they're being pursued. And on the train, there's some great action scenes on the train. And Wallace Beery is the bad guy, but in the end, he turns out to be good. He helps them in the end. So yeah, that was fantastic. And that's my 7 questions. And with the silent version take of it. And I think I'll end it there because I am after 26 plus minutes, I think. Thanks, Steve, for doing that. It was a pleasure to sort of think of all this. I wish I could have done it silent film all the way through. I suppose I could have pretended to create sort of Holy Grail ones that could have been made in the silent film era, but I was thinking of Gargantua, Pantagruel, and the Hyperion Cantos, and as well as City by Simak. Simak is one of my favorite writers. So I'll let you go there. I'll be back definitely tomorrow, I will say that, with Friday Reads. Have a good evening, BookTube.